Have you ever seen someone in trouble? Maybe a person collapsing on the street, or a fight breaking out nearby and felt frozen in place? Even stranger, have you noticed that in a crowd, nobody else seems to move either? You'd think more witnesses would mean more help, but the opposite often happens. Psychologists call this the bystander effect, and it reveals something uncomfortable about how our brains behave in groups. The story that brought this idea into public attention happened in 1964 in New York City. A 28-year-old woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked near her apartment. Early newspaper reports claimed that dozens of neighbors saw or heard her cries for help, but nobody stepped in or called police until it was too late. Later, investigations showed the story was exaggerated, but it still struck a nerve. How could so many people living just steps away fail to act? The event became infamous, and it motivated psychologists to start investigating why people freeze when they are surrounded by others. Two researchers, Bibb Latané and John Darley, began conducting experiments to find out. In one, a volunteer was placed in a room alone, and through the walls they could hear what sounded like another person having a seizure. When participants were alone, most rushed to get help almost immediately. But when they believed there were other witnesses in neighboring rooms, their response time slowed dramatically, and many never moved at all. In another experiment, volunteers filled out questionnaires in a room that gradually filled with smoke. When someone was alone, they almost always got up and reported the danger. But in groups, people coughed, rubbed their eyes, and looked at one another, yet did nothing. Some even stayed seated until the room was completely filled with smoke. The pattern was unmistakable. Being in a group often suppressed action. Why does this happen? Psychologists identified several key forces. The first is diffusion of responsibility. When many people are present, each individual feels less pressure to act because the responsibility is spread out. Surely someone else will call for help, we think. The second is social influence. Humans are wired to look to others for cues, especially in uncertain situations. If nobody else is panicking, we convince ourselves it must not be serious. And the third is fear of judgment. People worry about misinterpreting the situation and embarrassing themselves. Imagine rushing over to someone lying on the ground, only to find out they were just resting. That fear of looking foolish can be paralyzing. Together, these forces create a perfect storm of hesitation. The bystander effect isn't limited to emergencies on the street. It shows up in schools when bullying happens in front of dozens of classmates, but almost nobody intervenes. It appears in workplaces when harassment is witnessed but left unchallenged. And it even exists online. Millions of people might see a harmful post, a scam, or abusive comments, but most scroll past, assuming someone else will report it. The internet is one giant crowd, and the psychology of inaction follows us there too. At first glance, this might sound depressing, like humans are simply wired to abandon each other. But that's not the whole story. There are ways to override the bystander effect, and experiments show how small changes can flip the outcome. One of the most powerful is direct communication. If a victim points to someone specifically and says, "You, call 911, the hesitation disappears. That individual now feels responsible, and the diffusion effect vanishes. Another factor is personal connection. People are far more likely to help if they feel similar to the victim or if they share an identity, even something as small as a sports jersey. And then there's training. Lifeguards, medics, and people with first aid experience are consistently quicker to act, even in groups, because their training gives them confidence and a clear script for what to do. The bystander effect also highlights how our perception of emergencies is shaped by context. Alone, a sudden noise or collapse feels urgent and unmistakable. Surrounded by calm faces, the exact same event feels less alarming. Psychologists call this pluralistic ignorance. Everyone looks around, sees others doing nothing, and concludes there must be nothing wrong. Ironically, everyone is thinking the same thing, and everyone is wrong. There are cultural dimensions, too. Studies comparing countries have found differences in how strong the bystander effect is, depending on social norms around individual responsibility versus collective duty. In more collectivist cultures, people sometimes step in faster because group identity emphasizes mutual care. In more individualist societies, people hesitate longer, not wanting to intrude. Even subtle cultural expectations shape how quickly help arrives. The consequences of the bystander effect can be tragic, but they can also be mundane. Imagine a meeting at work where someone proposes a flawed idea. Everyone sees the problem, but no one speaks up, assuming someone else will. Or picture a crowded subway where someone drops their belongings. People glance at one another, but nobody bends down to help. These small moments echo the same psychology as life-or-death emergencies. And yet, awareness itself is a kind of antidote. People who know about the bystander effect are less likely to fall into its trap. If you realize that hesitation in crowds is a psychological reflex, you can choose to override it. In fact, some public awareness campaigns explicitly teach people to act quickly, to assign responsibility, and to trust their instincts rather than waiting for social proof. The effect loses power once it's named. So, what does this mean for us in everyday life? It means that if you notice something wrong, you are already the right person to act. Don't assume someone else will step forward, because everyone else is probably assuming the same thing. It means that speaking up, even at the risk of being wrong, is usually better than silence. And it means that courage doesn't always look like dramatic heroism. Sometimes, it looks like being the first person to move when everyone else is frozen. The bystander effect reminds us that human behavior is not just about individual choices, but about the invisible influence of groups. Alone, we can be brave. In crowds, we can be strangely passive. But with awareness and a little courage, we can break the spell. The next time you find yourself in that moment of hesitation, remember, action spreads too. When one person steps forward, others often follow. So here's my question for you. Have you ever seen a situation where everyone stood by, waiting, and no one acted? What do you think held people back? And if you were there again, what would you do differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. If you enjoyed this exploration, subscribe to The Curiosity Vault. Every day we unlock another hidden truth about how the human mind works. Until next time, stay curious.